Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for having me. Today, we're going to explore together a chapter from my PhD on life course social participation and physical activity in midlife using the 1970 British Cohort Study. A quick background to introduce you to the topic. Social participation, it's one of the components of the umbrella term for social health, or as you may have heard it as social fitness, which encompasses an individual's social connections and the resources that arise through those connections. It can be frequently described as a person's involvement in activities that provide interaction with others in society or the community. And then has been truly an abundance of evidence that links active participation in social and leisure activities with physical and mental health outcomes in later life, including happiness, health functioning, age-related physical decline, frailty, anxiety, and of course, a number of health-related behaviors. The idea is that providing a stimulating psychosocial and lifestyle environment could make a difference with protection and compensation in the face of pathology. A number of proposed mechanisms of action through which social participation promotes health and well-being includes increased opportunities to exchange social supports with others in a group, the maintenance of cognitive skills, which is known as use it or lose it in other occasions, and of course peer influence, which arises through encouragement and support that you may obtain through a group of individuals you're part of. A note on this is that this can have a negative connotation because it really depends on the type of behavior, on the type of influence that this group may have. You understand that there is a dark side of it when you may obtain a health behavior that, like smoking, that it doesn't have a health benefit. Previous analytical work has suffered either from methodological shortcomings related with a cross-sectional approach or the use of self-reported physical activity, which could lead to bias due to measurement error or a reverse causation. And there has been little work on the engagement in social activities through the life course and the changes it may have in physical activity with a focus in later life, while testing more than one life course model. We understand that the way a life unfolds and people transit through different life stages can lead to accumulation or loss of the resources related with social engagement. And we consider that adopting a life course approach helps us to understand the dynamic relationship between social participation and physical activity in later life. So we used two life course models. In the first one, we examined the independent association of social participation at different periods through the life course on our outcome of interest, which was physical activity at age 46. But we also examined the association of a cumulative social participation through the life course between the ages of 16 and 42 on our outcome of interest physical activity midlife. Now, when it comes to data that we used, I believe there is no much of special introduction need to make for the UK birth cohort studies in this audience, but the slide shows some of the cohorts housed in the Center for Longitudinal Studies in UCL. And for this work, we use data from the 1970 British Cohort Study, otherwise known as BC17, which is one of the national birth cohort studies. This specific one follows the lives of more than 1,700 individuals born in England, Scotland, and Wales in a single week in April in 1970. And among other factors, BC17 collects information on participants' health, education, and social and physical aspects of their development. Our analytical sample included all participants in BC70 at weight 10 at age 46, with something more than 8,000 participants. And our analysis considered those that had valid measurements of objectively measured physical activity for a week, as per the study's protocol, which led us to have an analytical final sample of 300 something more than 3,600 participants. We excluded those who died or emigrated by that time, by the age of 46 from analytical sample. And also, as part of the biomedical measures, there is a number of objectively measured biomedical outcomes, but also objective measures of physical activity that they were collected by the research team. For the first time since childhood, which is a very important figure. Cohorts were asked to wear a thigh-mounted accelerometer continuously for the course of a 7-day period, including their bathing time, sleeping, and all type of physical activity. Now, when it comes to our exposure of interest, we created binary indicators of participation or no participation to activities in each of the described sweeps, so age 16, 30, 34, and 42. And you can see the differences, a slight difference between the non-adult waves and the adult waves when it comes to capturing social participation. So at age 16, participants were asked whether they belong to any uniform youth organizations. And later in the adult sweeps, they were asked whether they engaged in a number of activities, including political parties, trade unions, social clubs, and so on. Physical activity for our work was assessed through two main measurements, mean daily step count and moderate to vigorous physical activity as hours per day. We evaluated two life course frameworks. As I mentioned, in the first one, we had a cumulative index of social participation that it was derived using responses from the individual age groups. None was a reference group where cohort members had a negative response in participation for all sweeps, so no participation at all. Low if they engaged with activities in one sweep, medium if they engaged 2 times, and as you understand, high if they engaged at least 3 or more times. In the second model, we examined these 4 different potentially sensitive windows of time, namely age 16, 30, 34, and 42, independently on the physical activity in midlife. We found no sex differences or interaction effects. Thus, we combined men and women into our analysis. In our main analysis, we used multivariable OLS regression models. The mean daily step count was log transformed as it was skewed, and keep that in mind. I will mention that again in the results. As for potential confounders, we included a range of demographic, socioeconomic, and health-related factors. Selection bias, of course, in the form of incomplete or missing data is unavoidable in longitudinal surveys, so we attempted to restore sample representativeness, increase power, reduce bias in our estimation by employing multiple imputations with chained equations, and we generated 15 QD datasets for that. Now, to check the robustness of our findings, we conducted a number of sensitivity analyses. The first one, we repeated the analysis for the accumulation model, and we restricted the responders to different scenarios. And for sensitivity analysis 2 and 3, what we tried to identify is if slight differences to the ways the questions on social participation were asked, they may have or may not have an effect on the findings we observed. So for age 42, cohort members were asked whether they engaged with several activities, but compared to the other groups, to the other age sweeps, they were also asked as part of this list if they participated in sports clubs. And you understand that there's a high correlation with this specific type of participation and physical activity. So we repeated the analysis by omitting the specific type from the indicator of participation. For the third sensitivity analysis, when cohort members were asked in all adult waves about the participation, they were offered a list of suggested activities and an open category of other type of participation they could fill out. Age 30 was the only one that this other option was not available, so we repeated the analysis by omitting altogether age 30 from the participation index. And finally, for the last sensitivity analysis, we explored how previous physical activity status could affect the observed findings and repeated the analysis for all models, adjusting for self-reported physical activity through the life course. Now, some results, some descriptive findings. We have 49.2% reported participation in activities at age 16. You can see this is dropping at age 30, but then it picks up at close to 60% at age 42. And to remind you on the models, we have two, the accumulation model and the sensitive period model, and this is how I'm gonna also present them now. So what you can see here is a forest plot with the adjusted regression coefficients and the corresponding 95% confidence intervals for the accumulation model by each of the physical activity measures. I remind you the reference category was no social participation at all from ages 16 to 42. And here the regression coefficients for the mean daily step count and only for the mean daily step count represent log regression coefficients. And what we see is that accumulated social participation between 16 and 42 indicate a higher daily step count for those in the medium and high category compared to those with no social participation at any life stage. And a positive association, again, observed for all participation index categories and hours per day engaging in moderate and vigorous physical activity. The effects was more pronounced for those with medium and high participation compared to the ones in the low category. For the sensitive peer model now, again, we found, you see that again, the same type of outcome, but what we found was no evidence of association for most of the potentially sensitive windows and daily steps or moderate vigorous physical activity, with the exception of later life social participation, that it was associated with an increase in both of the physical activity outcomes. Now, some sensitivity analysis. I remind you the type of sensitivity analysis we did. I am not going to torture you with this table where we repeated the analysis with different sample restrictions, but essentially what we found that the associations became more pronounced, as you would expect, since there was an increase in power in the different scenarios. The way I present the findings for the rest of the sensitivity analysis is that on the left-hand side, you can see the findings from the main model that you already seen. And on the right side, I will present the sensitivity analysis findings. So in this analysis, we excluded people who participated in sports clubs at age 42. We found for the accumulation model that the results were less pronounced compared to the main model for those in the medium and high category, and the association between low participation and moderate and vigorous physical activity, as you can see, was no longer statistically significant on the 5% level. For the sensitive period model, the results remain largely the same for this occasion, with small changes for social participation at age 42. And when we omitted altogether age 30 from the modeling, the results remain broadly the same. Small attenuations in the effect sizes, and what we can see for the accumulation model, like previous sensitivity analysis, is that the results are less pronounced for those in the medium and high category. Maybe you're doubting it, but it's still, even the high category is still statistically significant, and the difference were more pronounced for the findings for moderate and vigorous physical activity. Similar picture for the sensitive peer model when we omitted age 30. Finally, after adjusting for self-reported physical activity, the results remained more or less the same, small attenuations in the effect sizes. Changes more pronounced in the sensitive peer model at age 34. And based on the findings for both the accumulation and the sensitive period model, we concluded that the risk of reverse causation due to previous physical activity was quite low. Now, overall, what we found is that life course matters. We found higher social engagement throughout the life course associated with physical activity at midlife. We found more pronounced effect sizes for moderate and vigorous physical activity, that they were independent of potential confounder factors. And for the sensitive peer models, we found that there is an association with more recent participation and physical activity in midlife. Now, our study has several strengths. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first longitudinal examination on the topic. We used a sample of a very well-established, large, nationally representative birth cohort study. We capitalized on the longitudinal structure of BCS70 and included rich information on cohort members' socioeconomic and health controls over the life course. And quite importantly, we used thigh-worn accelerometers to measure physical activity rather than self-report, which is a gold standard approach and a more efficient way to validate physical activity in the epidemiological literature. Now, a common limitation of all prospective longitudinal studies is selective attrition and losses related with missing data. Hence, to mitigate potential bias, we used multiple imputation, which is an approach that capitalizes on the rich observables on BCS70. And it should be noted, though, we operationalize social engagement in an agnostic way with respect to exact what type of activity those members engaged. So the different types of activities, let's say volunteering or union membership, may have a differential effect on physical activity. Furthermore, due to the data constraints, we're not able to examine intensity of engagement at each sweep, and objective measures of physical activity were only available at one time point during adulthood for this cohort. Thus, we cannot generalize the findings in other age groups, and of course, as you understand, they may not be applicable to younger cohorts. Finally, in all analysis with observational data, bias due to unmeasured confounding cannot be ruled out. However, we conducted sensitivity analysis, included self-reported physical activity at various stages of the life course as a potential confounder. Hence, we estimated a lagged outcome model, which lends some reassurance against unmeasured confounding. What I would like you to keep from here is that we expanded our understanding on the topic, provide new evidence on the link of these two, and we find quite an importance on sustaining social participation at all ages of the life course, if we also consider the importance of physical activity and inactivity as a leading risk factor linked to increased morbidity and mortality. Encouraging sustained social engagement at all ages is a key. Now, this work was initiated during my visiting period at Harvard, so I would like to especially thank Professor Ichiro Kawachi, who hosted me, and of course my co-authors. Very special thanks to my supervisors, Professor George Blubidis, Professor Daisy Fancourt, and Professor Alice Sullivan for their valuable support. And the paper has been recently published at the European Journal of Epidemiology, is also available as a preprint, so you can have a look. And of course, I would be very happy to receive any questions. I think that was all for me. Thank you for your attention. Please hit me with any questions, and also feel free to reach out with anything that you would like to connect.